Welcome back for this first interview of the season. It's been a while, but we are back with an interview, this time not with a member of the European Parliament, but like I said at the beginning of the season, I'm trying to bring a different perspective on EU politics. And today we will have like a very different perspective from what we normally have, because we will have tonight Didrik de Schaetzen, who is the Secretary General of the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe, or as we will refer it throughout the chat, ALDE. ALDE is the pan-European party. So we'll talk a bit what is a pan-European party, how it works, etc., etc. But it's a pan-European party that gathers and coordinates liberal parties from all over Europe and belongs in the European Parliament to the Renew Europe political group, so the centrist. So Mr. de Schaetzen is both the spokesperson of the party and is also the campaign director for the 2024 EU election. So of course that's going to be an important role in the months to come. Before we start our conversation, as usual, a small reminder of the house rules for anyone who would be new with us tonight. So our guest will be with us for 1 hour. After that, he will go and enjoy the rest of his evening, and you will be stuck with me because I'll keep staying for another half an hour to discuss with you what you thought of the interview, do a bit of a debrief, answer additional questions, provide additional content. So a nice discussion for following up on the interview. As usual, I have prepared my own questions for Mr. de Schaetzen, and you, of course, have the ability to suggest your question via the chat. I will keep an eye on it, so don't hesitate to react, to suggest your questions, and I will keep an eye on the chat and relay your question if they are relevant, if we have time, and all this. So feel free to participate, but as always, don't spam and stay civil. And I think that with this, we have covered our basis, and I suggest that we dive right in. Good evening, Mr. de Schaetzen. Thank you very much for accepting to come with us tonight and answer our questions. So, you heard me do a very brief introduction about you and ALDE. Is there anything you would like to add before we dive in?
No, I think I'm looking forward for this discussion. So as you mentioned, I'm the Sec Gen of the ALDE Party, but also campaign director. So I'm looking forward for any question you might have on how this is going to play. So I'm all yours.
All right. So actually, let's start with you. You mentioned you're Sec Gen, you're the campaign director. Can you maybe briefly explain what is the role of a Sec Gen, of a Secretary General and a campaign director? Because it's, like I mentioned, we didn't have someone from a pan-European party, so it's a rather different approach to European politics than when we are used to here.
But maybe, Quentin, if you'll allow me, I'll focus then on what a European political party is first.
Let's go for that.
I'll tell you my role, if that works for you.
Yeah, okay.
And I'll tell you very bluntly, all European political parties, most of them were created in 1976. So the Conservative, EPP, PS, ALDE were created around the same time in March 1976. So the first time the European Parliament got elected directly. And previously, and that's not very nice, I think people said it was mostly a group of, well, mostly old men, I think at the time, gathering for congresses. And I think they called this as a networking group for old politicians. Not very nice, but I fear it was a little bit true from 1976 all the way until Maastricht. Maastricht Treaty, for the first time, we really got our role as a European political party. It's mentioned in the treaties. And there, I think we started coordinating the work. Obviously, a lot of you are familiar with our groups in the European Parliament, but here we also coordinate the work between our prime ministers, also ministers, commissioners, but also parliamentarians throughout Europe. And we organize big congresses, but also before, and that's probably something your audience doesn't know, and I don't blame them, but before any European Council, the political families gather first together. So before the European Council now, the socialists will gather usually in the square in Brussels, and the conservatives on Jourdan, we take the Palais des Académies, and so we basically meet in a political family with our prime ministers, and in our case, the French president. And that was a whole step since, I would say, Maastricht. But some people, still critics, call this glorified event organizers, which is not very nice, but was maybe a little bit true too, until 2014. 2014 is when the concept of Spitzenkandidaten came out. If you don't know what Spitzenkandidaten means, you're perfectly normal. It is just this concept we had of having lead candidates for European elections. And that changed the element and added a whole element of European campaigning, which I'll discuss later on. And that's maybe the third step. And their political called us recently the best kept secret in Brussels. So there you go, from an old club of networking to glorified event organizers to the best kept secret of Brussels. I think that would be a description for European political parties. Would you like me to go on then on my function as such? Is that,
no, go ahead on what is the role of Secretary General there.
Briefly, that's the organization, and I'm indeed the Secretary General. It's managing a small team of 30 people, but it's mostly ensuring the link between our member parties. And you'd be surprised. This morning we had the Generals Affairs Council, so it's a Minister of Foreign Affairs gathering. We have 5 ministers of our political family. So we had a breakfast meeting just to align positions on some of the issues at the Council. And so that is an element that I do too, as I mentioned. It's making sure our parliamentarians or ministers that they align, and often you will find that there are some things that unite us quite a lot ideologically, and that is, I would say, my main job. We also have we try to support our member parties with policy ideas. Sometimes there are elements where we don't really have policy. I was going to say AI, but that obviously is not true anymore because we do have some legislation. But before that, when there's something new coming up, I don't know if there's a legislation around Twitch. I don't think we have to have it. But you see,
no, it would be DSA, it would be AVMS directive, so it's already covered to an extent.
No, but you see what I mean. So we help with policy. That is one element that is really a strong element of our unit. We have a program for women in politics, which is really important. We spend a lot of time on that. So that is a little bit what in very short terms, what I do as a Secretary General. And then maybe I come with my second hat there of campaign director. Now, I'm probably the only one, actually, I'm being careful, but I shouldn't be. I'm the only one that actually covered the 3 last campaigns. So in 2014, I was campaign coordinator, campaign director in 19 and 24, which has a slight advantage, is that my political opponents, well, they don't really know the rule of the games to the same extent. But it's really something that it's really an interesting role to have, because sometimes I'm running a campaign that doesn't exist. And what I mean by that is that obviously you can vote directly for ALDE. But for the Nordics of your audience there, I'm sure familiar of one thing. They can't lie about it, as they know what Eurovision is. And even in France, they know what Eurovision is. So that's the thing. In 2014 and 19, we had for the first time, I was on stage for Eurovision. Not for singing, unfortunately.
I'm listening. How do you?
Because we had a Eurovision debate for candidates for presidency of the Commission. So, okay, way less sexy, way less interesting. And our critics said that only 1.5 million watched it. I was told 1.8. I don't care. Still a small audience, but it's still much more than nothing at all. And this time it will happen again. You'll have a Eurovision debate that will take place with the candidates of the Commission. And then you can complain. I mean, I'm the generation where we had a president of the Commission called Barroso. I had no idea how to influence that. There was no way as a citizen to kind of have an indication who would be president of the Commission. Whereas the generation after, at least they know that if they vote Conservative EPP, they will probably get von der Leyen. If they get a socialist, they'll probably have Schmidt. And so for the first time, you had this debate, which was a bit nerdy, granted. But I always have that example. In 2014, I remember when Guy Verhofstadt was asked, how would you structure a commission of 27? He said, he was our lead candidate at the time, a former Belgian PM. And he said, look, if I'm president of the commission, I will take I will structure this with a couple of VPs and commissioners responding to it. And that's the first time you heard it there. Well, it turns out the Conservatives took the idea. Doesn't matter, EPP took it, but it had some sense. It was an interesting debate.
And for the Eurovision debate of this year, is the date already set?
Yes, it is. Can I check my calendar? It's end of May. Give me 1 second. It's not fully official yet, so I'm giving you a scoop. Let me just tell you, end of May. I don't have the exact date, but it's not fully arranged yet, but it's very likely it will take place.
Okay, well, taking a note even for myself, because I would be interested in covering that, of course. And so you mentioned like you're the only one of the campaign director out there at the moment that's covered 3 different European campaigns. So how did you see the way of doing campaign, the nature of the campaign itself like change over the past 15 years?
It's funny you bring that up because it looked like this question was planned. It's not, but I'm really excited about it because I can really give you a perspective. In 2014, I went to my section at the time and I said, look, there's going to be this thing of lead candidates. And he was very much like, yeah, but you know, campaigns are done nationally, you cannot vote for us, so this is not going to be important. And in a way, he was right, and I had to fight for the use of our meeting room for 2 months and 2 stagiaires. So that was my resources at the time, and to get, please, the title of campaign coordinator for the ALDE Party. So I really had to fight the battle upstream. And turns out, indeed, nobody was really expecting this to be. I mean, the EPP had an event in Dublin.
Yeah, I was there.
2 candidates. Yep. Yeah, they had Bono that sang in Dublin, which I thought was really cool. Yeah, at first I was really jealous. I was like, darn, I also want Bono. Until when he spoke, he really bashed on the EPP. I was less jealous then. But they had 2 candidates, they speak one. For us, it became, well, we liberals, it was a bit complicated. We had 2 candidates. And the night before the elections, we were with our colleagues counting, and we had a horror scenario, 50-50 for Guy and those against, which was the worst scenario. So we had actually 2 candidates. We had Guy Verhofstadt for presidency of the Commission, Olli Rehn, the candidate for president of Finland until recently, that was candidate for top positions. So there you go. It was really a battle where people thought it would not matter. Several parties did not participate. And that's the one where we first reached, I think already there, 850,000 people that watched the Eurovision debate, but it was first start of a campaign. 2019, things changed completely. I really had some resources, we had a budget, and we really, in 14, I was expecting us to, there was the elections and that will have a bit of an effect after, and 31st of May, post-election, that's it, baf, parties were gone, groups took over, and in 2014, I could have taken holidays in June. 2019, I was expecting to take holidays. I actually mentioned I would take holidays to my wife in 19, but surprisingly, the campaign lasted a bit longer because the whole negotiation around the commission president, the top jobs, was much more complex. So we still had a role to play before really the parliamentary groups took the most. So now in 2024, what's different? I think now I, for the first time, have to lower expectation a little bit. So I always had to fight saying, this is where it happens. Now I'm like, have to remind people that the elections are really happening nationally. But this remains very important, obviously. But the proportions are, where it really matters is obviously in the countries. It's to come with more MEPs. But for the first time, if you want to have somebody that embeds the campaign, that can really share the values, then this is where this lead candidate concept is interesting. Because let's be very frank, I mean, I'm Belgian, my wife is Swedish, I have 3 Swedish daughters. There's absolutely no way they will take the fact that just because they happen to be in Belgium, they're forced to vote for a Belgian MEP. And so at one point, I don't care when it is, hopefully as quickly, but we will have the opportunity to vote for Europeans at European elections. This will have to change. It's something we wanted for a long time.
And before, so we started to talk a bit about the campaign. I would just like briefly to come back on ALDE as a party in itself. So like I mentioned in the introduction, ALDE is a pan-European party, and you have party members like in the EU member states, but even beyond. Like I was looking at the list, you even have a member in Russia. So that's how do you make it work when you have parties that are working within the EU, so there's already a first level of coordination, but also those that are outside the EU, they probably have different priorities. So how do you make that mesh together? Like, is there let's say a priority given to the European Union, and then the other are a bit more on the side, or not? How does it work?
Well, here you're going to hear, in case you interview some other people from European parties, you're going to hear something very different, because we are really in our core European parties. For me, the party servant of the people of President Zelensky is just as much a member as, I don't know, the MR in Belgium or VVD or DP in Luxembourg. It's really not core. And personally, now I'm making the Maastricht Treaty mentioned European political parties. It doesn't say EU political parties. The authority that watches over us is the authority watching over European political parties. So this is really in our DNA. And it really does make sense, because I don't want to make predictions here. I hate doing that, but the reality is I do not want to be the person that tells you that there's no way UK doesn't join again in 15 years, or that Norway joins in 10, 15. You have to keep these things open. And that's why it's super important, as I said, to have relations with members of parliament, with ministers, if they are, but also just personal contacts, because you can't just open borders and then suddenly make contacts. You need to establish relations. So we are profoundly European. There's a small caveat to this. That's obviously for when we adopt a manifesto, which we'll do later on, and I'm sure you'll ask me about it. There, it's EU member parties that vote, and also for Spitzenkandidat, it's EU member parties that vote. So that's the two little exceptions where I would say there's a distinction between EU and European member parties. But there's a lot of pressure from, we feel, of people that want to push us in the same format as EPP, PES, where there's some European ones, but they cannot vote or they're not in our bureau. I have a Ukrainian vice president, for example. I have a UK vice president. So in our case, it's really part of our DNA.
Mm-hmm. And so to join a pan-European party, of course, you need to have the same values. You need to share a general platform. And there's been debates lately about the membership of ALDE. In the chat, someone is mentioning the Parti Liberanerla in Sweden. My Swedish, like I said, is not as good as yours. But there's this party. We know there's ANO, the case of ANO in Czech Republic. So. In this case, how do you deal with it? Is it something that you're going to deal before the elections, or is it something that you say, okay, we'll deal with that after the election?
Look, we have to be realistic. I'd love to say Liberalna is a sole case. Unfortunately, it has happened before. And for countries that don't have the tradition of coalitions, like France, for example, it's really difficult to understand because it's a winner takes it all. Here, we unfortunately had to establish some sort of routines. And what we do, and that is how we apply it now, is that we really ensure liberal values are defended. So basically, and I'm not trying to defend anything here, but we ensure that the government at least defends our values. So we judge not on possible partnerships, but on the execution. So we really monitor the countries. We analyze, in the case of Liberalena, we analyze a T2 agreement. We read it in details. And we really implement. And there has been cases where we have a procedure to kick out member parties in case there are coalitions that do not respect liberal values anymore.
Did it ever happen that you kicked out a party out of ALDE?
We were once this close, but the government fell. I'm not going to tell you where, but it was very close. We have kicked out member parties, but not on the grounds that you're looking for.
Okay.
There was different grounds, but it does exist. And it's never something we do with pleasure, and it's never our first solution, but it has happened. I'd love to say it's an isolated case, but and I think, unfortunately, if you look, I mentioned I was Belgian, so if I look at the extreme right north in the Netherlands, but also in Germany, even in France, we're surrounded by countries where extreme right is on the rise.
And in the case of ANO, because in the case of ANO, there is a procedure that is open against that, if I'm not mistaken.
There's a very big difference there, and a nuance there is right now it's focused on some statements that were made by the chair of ANO. Mm-hmm. So there's a small nuance on we have excellent relations with all ANO, but on some of the statements of the chair, we've had some issues, and we indeed are monitoring the party.
To finish on the parties, and then we'll go into the campaign in itself. You mentioned that there is a European authority overviewing a bit what pan-European parties are doing, but how is even like a pan-European party financed? Is it something that you receive contribution from your national members? Do you receive money from the European budget? So how do you make the lights work, basically, in the office?
Well, yes to both. So we get a grant of the European Parliament based on how many MEPs are affiliated with us. So that is our main source of income. It corresponds to 90% of our budget. But we do have to find 10% ourselves, of which the majority of the finances come from membership fees. So members pay membership fees. And our associate member and our members outside the European Union pay fees also as a membership to the ALDE Party.
Okay. And like I don't know if you can tell me the figures, but what kind of budget are we looking at when for European Party? Yeah,
it looks like I don't know, but I really do. But it varies. So I think if you say a scheme between 5 and 7 million euros, that's approximate our yearly budget, which is quite decent.
Yeah, allows you to do quite a thing, and there will be things to be done in the next 6 months with the European election. And speaking of that, so we already discussed a little bit the fact that ALDE is working on a manifesto for the European election. So first, could you explain what is a manifesto? What is a manifesto, and why does the Pan-European Party have a manifesto?
Well, first of all, why, if we don't have one, we don't exist. It's one of the obligations of being a European political party is to have a manifesto before the elections. And I'm really proud about, I'm not going to tell you exactly what's in there. I'm going to give you some directions, but I'm even extremely proud about the process. So first of all, one thing that keeps surprising me, and I don't want to judge my great colleagues that work on it, but when we call for editors of the manifesto, we have ministers, we have foreign ministers, former ministers, but we really have high-profile people that want to contribute to this exercise. So that's one thing. We've got a great bunch of authors. But then also our process is we really do listen to every input. We had over a whole year people that could contribute to the manifesto. We also had experts. We had town halls. I'm going to say all over Europe. It's maybe pushing it, but we were both in the north, in the center, south, east, west. And we had town halls where granted, let's be fair, there were a lot of our member parties there too, but it was open for everyone. We had people of the public. We held 2 in a bar, so obviously we had some people in the bar. And so I think that is really a process where I'm very happy about. So now we closed the contribution part, so if you had a great idea, you missed your shot. But the idea there is now we submitted it to our member parties, and on 20th of March, we'll adopt our political manifesto.
And once you have the manifesto, the manifesto is agreed at pan-European level, but then, like you said, the campaign are mostly done at national level. So how do you make it mesh? Because different countries will have different priorities, and do you see sometimes cases where, well, you may have a conflict between the priorities, I don't know, of the French party with the ALDE manifesto, or do you smooth things out if you smooth them?
I'm not sure there's real conflict. However, what does happen is people do cherry pick a little bit what's in the manifesto, things that are closer to their heart. And to be honest, that I don't really mind. I mean, again, it has to work nationally. So I think some people highlight some of the stuff a bit more. Look, the reality is, I don't know how many manifestos you read yourself. It's a very important tool because it helps set priorities, and also it helps delivering what we've promised after. And one of the best things of manifesto is to judge ourselves on what we said we were going to do, even more than a tool to see, do you want to vote for us? But I think it is an effort of a compromise already at national levels when you make, and here it's a compromise at European level. So I'm excited about how we did the process, and but the reality is indeed some member parties pick some parts and highlight some more importantly than others.
And once you have this manifesto, okay, you have the priorities of the parties that are set. You fulfill your legal obligations. The party every party has contributed to the manifesto. Then you have to go campaigning. How does the Pan-European Party campaign?
Well, we don't really. No, I'm provocative because yes, we do around the lead candidates, but I'm looking at the comment there from a gentleman somebody in your chat there. We cannot fund parties directly or campaigns directly, so we cannot help our member parties at all, neither financially. But it goes much more than that. I'm going to confess a crime, which I guess should reach your audience. But in 2019, I had a brief window where I could promote social media posts. So I was promoting lead candidates, but I was always excluding their country of origin because that would benefit them. And I think accidentally, when promoting our lead candidate in Estonia, I for a second forgot to remove the tag of Estonia, and I sponsored the post for 3.2 euros, I think for a couple of 4 minutes. And what's really interesting is that the authority monitoring European elections, or elections in general in Tallinn, reached out to me. And I had to apologize, acknowledge that the party did not know, and so that was it shows you that there is such a monitoring element, but so we cannot help member parties directly. And to answer your question, I was joking around saying we don't campaign, but no, we have the profile of the lead candidates where we really have them at debates. I mentioned Eurovision because that's always an eye catcher, but there's also one in Maastricht that is very likely to take place end of April. And there is one that's really special at the European University Institute. Why do I say it's special? It's because it's a room full of academics and they actually read through all manifestos. They compare with past manifestos. Everything I told you that not everybody reads manifesto is untrue when you're in Florence. In Florence, they check out one of your member parties there. It's a niche debate, but it's also important to have it.
Yeah, so in the end, you're not having like activists like do door-to-door distributing manifesto, but you're more like at the meta level, organizing around the Spitzenkandidat, because they in the end the idea of the Spitzenkandidat is to be the face of the respective parties, etc., and themselves to do a bit the campaign, but you don't interfere with the campaign, the national campaign. Because you don't have the resources, but also probably because of legal constraints at national level.
Mostly that one, they really check us out. So again, €3.5 is spotted. I think if I'd go, no, there's really limits on what we can do. Everything that benefits. I even had a problem. I can even tell you when our lead candidate was Belgian, and we coordinated a Eurovision debate, which happened to be in Brussels. I was really sweating, saying, well, are they not going to say it benefits Guy Verhofstadt, who was also a candidate in Belgium, etc.? At least they got it was really fully European, and I mean, you cannot blame, in the case of, if there's a big event with all lead candidates and in Luxembourg, we're not going to blame Schmidt for this helping him his national campaign. I mean, there's a reality so the nature of the debate is luckily, there's an understanding there.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned that once you have the manifesto, national parties may like pick and choose a bit the things they like in it, but do they tend to pick a lot in it, or they will just take one issue and the rest they will leave it aside? Like how successful, let's say, is the manifesto to inspire the campaign at national level, you would say? At least of your members.
When I say that they can pick and choose, I prefer not, but they tend to do it, and it's normal. They know their audience, their national audience, much better than we do. I think more and more these manifestos, I've seen 3, this is my 3rd one, and the inclusive process and the level of authors that keeps being bigger means they're being used more and more. We translate them in the languages of people who actually want it, of our member parties. So I think the fair thing to say is compared to the ones that it's getting shorter and shorter, better and better, and it's being read more and more and used more and more by our member parties.
And well, of course, you haven't adopted yet the ALDE manifesto, but can you tell us a bit about like the main priorities that ALDE has chosen to defend for the upcoming campaign?
We didn't just pick our ideas like that. We're a party that spent a lot of time establishing surveys, but also really listening as much as we could all over Europe. And again, it's not only the town halls, but we really try to feel what the voters really want. And people are concerned. What's scared me a little bit is if I compare the polling and data resources we have from 19 and now, is that in 19 the world was not, we had Brexit, etc., but the Liberals remained very strong optimists. They've always been, I cannot compare for ages ago, but I've had a feeling we always had the optimism. And for the first time, we really feel that people are worried and really concerned that they might not be in a better stage than that their kids might have a tougher time. And that's really new for us. So there's definitely the dimension of environment. It's very technical, it's maybe even a bit boring, but this Green Deal that we really helped voting through is something that now needs to be implemented. It's imperfect. A lot of the things in the EU are not perfect, but it's a big step forward, and we really want to move on that one. Second one is indeed on helping SMEs and industry, and it's probably one joke in the Brussels bubble, how we call it, but between Brussels individuals, and we usually have this joke that says, US invents, China copies, and EU makes regulations about it, regulates. Well, it used to be funny, and I think now when you talk to SMEs business, it just stopped being funny, because I think there is a level of regulation sometimes that goes a bit too far. And we really want to support SMEs and industry in that way, and just check that regulation that is needed, that is necessary, really, but that it doesn't go too far. And then there's an element of earning back trust. Surprisingly, I I wouldn't say Qatargate really went to every country and is a real concern, but it did put a big blow on us. I think that Europeans are campaigning at European level, and so we have to earn back the trust to show the institutions work, because there's quite a lot of things we can be proud about. Spoke about an Estonian prime minister that had calculated when they would have likely gotten their vaccine if they would have just bought it like a regular one. And I think at the time, I'm talking from memory, they said they would have gotten it by the end of 23. So a couple of months ago, that's when they would have gotten their vaccines, which is, well, obviously we didn't, but it's these common vaccine purchase is really something that worked. The debt structuration is really something we really managed to find funds and to stand together on that element. So there's a lot of things we can actually be proud about. But now there is an element also on delivering on some of the things we implemented. So I think I kind of hinted on what you can expect.
Yeah, and speaking, since you mentioned the Green Deal, or you said it's very technical, etc., but actually it's something that is very much in the news these days. There is farmers' protest in several countries in Europe. In Brussels today there were protests, and there is a bit around the EU. We see a movement of backlash against the green policies in general, and it's interesting because someone in the chat was mentioning it. Like in 2019, we had a wave of young people who participated in the election, and everyone was talking about fighting climate change, etc. Everybody was very enthusiastic, whether on the right or on the left. And now we're seeing like the opposite movement. So focusing on the Green Deal and now the protest farmers, like, is there a feeling that maybe the Green Deal went too far, or that there needs to be tweaked a little bit? So what is the future, let's say, of the Green Deal in 2024 and beyond?
Two things. There's one thing I really generally don't get. I absolutely don't. How now the protest movements by the farm are being capitalized on extreme right, which is one that I really, really fought against. Everything that helped out on cap reform, on the budget. They've never been the friends of farmer. So I find that a crazy political twist how they managed to capitalize on that. And the reason why I say that is that's very strange and not usual, but in our political family, I would say in the north, we are traditionally the farmers' party. I'm talking Centerpartiet in Sweden, Keskusta in Finland, but even Venstre in Denmark. So we are, a big part of our family is really has roots in agriculture. You know, I'm studied European political science ages ago, but I remember at that time when I studied it, it was still comfortably the farmer's budget, the CAP, politique d'agriculture commune, common agricultural policy, was more than 50% of the budget.
73% in 85.
Yeah,
I did the math.
My time, I'm not that old. I think in my time it was already a bit but it was way above 50, and which is quite impressive if you looked what you got out of this. And there's one thing that really, really frustrates me is when now we still have 30% where people say goes to the farmer, which is so fundamentally afraid, so fundamentally wrong. I mean, the 30% go to you and I, that we can buy cheaper tomatoes and cheaper fruit, cheaper vegetables. So this 30% do not go to farmers. They help us to keep food affordable and our products affordable. So based on your question, I don't think as much it's linked to a Green Deal dimension. In the Netherlands specifically, it was linked to Azot. That's where it actually started in the... it's strange, I don't know the English word for it. Doesn't matter. You get the issue we had in the Netherlands, which is because there's intensive animal farming, breeding, sorry. So I believe the issues are founded. I'm very close to the farming community myself. And I believe we need to address it, but it's a sector that will need to mutate, and that's always a bit scary, and that is always a bit, but we'll need to. I think there is at the same time, for those that are fearing the developments in agriculture, you can also feel that the element of strategic autonomy, the element of autonomy is also there. So if I was a farmer, I would really understand the hassle of, as I joked before, of over-regulation, of too much standards. That's one thing. But I would also feel reassured that people do want to produce locally, do want independence locally, and I think this is both a bit of a concern, but there is also some strong support for locally produced and autonomy in terms of food too.
One of the areas of concerns of farmers, Raspberry in the chat is mentioning it, is the importance of trade deals, the impact of trade deals rather on them, and particularly there is a mention of Mercosur, so the project of trade deals between the EU and the single market in South America, basically. So how does ALDE approach like Mercosur, but also the overall issue of trade deal? Because ALDE is the Liberal Party. Historically, liberals are pro-trade. So how do you tackle this thing?
Yes, as you rightfully point, in general, we are very pro-trade, but we are not pro-trade under any conditions. And if you look at the size of trade deals from history, which was a 10-page document to a 30-page document to now, the elements of restriction and imposing policies of quality of food, of all this is really, it's a little bit unfair to compare trade deals now of trade deals of 15, 20 years ago. I think now it becomes much more demanding on the partners on the other side. And so I think response to your question is that yes, we remain, I would say maybe the best way to say it is, if I pardon my French, but we could say oui, mais. And I think the mais became much stronger. It's yes, but. And the buts of trade becomes more and more important. We don't make trade deals with anyone anymore, and not with any conditions. And I think that is responding to your question.
Mm-hmm. Okay, très bien. And to switch to a different topic, because we have this week an extraordinary European summit where the EU leaders will gather to try to hammer a deal on the EU budget, but also on support to Ukraine. There's 50 billion euros in the balance there, and overcome a potential veto from Viktor Orban. How do you approach this situation where there is a need to support Ukraine, but we struggle to find the unity at 27? Like we have Viktor Orban who is becoming very bullish in his approach. I don't know if you saw the article today in the FT mentioning a so-called secret plan to potentially break the economy of Hungary in retaliation. So, what's your take on that?
It's one of our prime ministers at the time that I won't quote, but he said that we've had the most extensive PP break ever in European history when we managed to find a solution when Orban left the room.
Yeah,
that's a very expensive toilet break. We want to reform the institutions. We've always known as the ones that love it most, want to change the most. So we really like the EU, but we really want to change some things, and veto rights is one of the elements we'd like to change. So that is one element. We cannot be blackmailed by one country or one. That's not even true. It's not one country. Apologies. It's one country's leader that has these positions, and so this causes harm. And if the EU will expand and become bigger, we need to have rules where qualified majorities, I don't care, but we'll need to find some solutions to be able that the very, very vast majority gets to decide, and that is how the EU should work.
And going back on Ukraine itself, so Ukraine now has the status of candidate countries. Negotiations should be open at some point to start the process of adhesion, which will take time. But there's already not some backlash, but at least some worries in the farmers. Some of the farmers, particularly in the bordering country, are not so necessarily enthusiastic about Ukraine joining, because Ukraine is a big competitor in terms of agriculture. There is question from some, but we're going to have borders with Russia. To an extent, we already have borders with Russia. It's not going to be that much different, but still a much bigger portion. It's going to be a country that will have been at war, so there will be a lot of funds that will have to be dedicated to that. So, do you think that Ukraine will be like an adhesion like we've had for decades, or is going to be like a special case that we require like a very special way to be handled to make it politically acceptable around the EU?
Personally, I always have one thing that's really important to me is I answer a question when it comes, and I'm not talking to your question, but a question of adhesion of Ukraine is not going to happen now, not next year, not the year after. if everything goes super well, I think the most optimistic say 8 years. So I'm not very sure about that. But anyway, it's not going to be a question that's going to be asked now. So the question that you're being asked is not, does Ukraine going to join right now? Is, do we start discussions right now? Yes. And as soon as you meet the Copenhagen criteria, you're in. But that does take time. And you know what I always find interesting? I feel a bit alone on that. But you know the Copenhagen criteria, which are the rules to join the club, right? I mean, isn't it cool that there is like this one set of rules that nobody questions? Everybody agrees. It's a pretty, like nobody says, oh, Copenhagen criteria needs to be revised. No, they're quite clear. They're strict. And once you reach them, you're in, but it does take time. There are problems in Ukraine, quite a lot one. There are things that are, it's not a country that can join immediately. But the question that's being asked to you now, and I mean EU leaders, not you and I, is not, can they join now? Huh? Can we take a chair and take them in? No. It's, do we want to start discussions so that when they're ready, they can join? And it's really dangerous to preempt answers. Because I think our generation, maybe our parents, when they were asked if Spain should join, as a dictatorship, were they ready? And now nobody questions it. Everybody thinks it's completely normal, and that's how it should be. So, sorry if I spoke a bit too long and about me, but I think that is really what I mean. Is the question is not do they join right now? Is once they're ready, once they fill the Copenhagen criteria, that's when the question will come. So the question will be asked to you again, because also people forget that. But there's a second step. You need to start negotiations, but you need to accept also. So there will be time, but it's a process that goes very slowly, and that I think is good. It's because it's going to some elements. You mentioned, I'm not ditching the question on agriculture. Yeah, I'd also is how do we manage this? I mean, there's this huge producer of grains and this huge production of agricultural product. And if it would be tomorrow, I'd be really worried too. But again, this is not tomorrow. There will be reflections on how to do it. I don't like too much your suggestion of having special deals, special status.
Well, it's not me saying it. I know in the some Eastern countries are saying that.
No. Apologies. I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to direct it to you. But the deal is quite easy. Maybe I can ask a question. Well, no, I was going to say, but there's one country that was not allowed to join the EU. Which one's that?
Not Morocco. Yes, Morocco, 1987.
Exactly. Well, that's normally you're one of the few that knows it. Morocco, not. Why? Because it's not part of the European continent. So the borders are not extensive to the end. It has to be on the European continent or you get a no. But it's that, and if you adhere to the values. And the values after were set up in Copenhagen criteria. So to sum up that element, yes, I understand there's some concern on agriculture. Some have some issues with the corruption in that country that still exists. We don't have to lie about that either. But the question that's being asked now is not, can Ukraine be a member? It's a fake question, is, can we open the candidate status so that they can be a member when they're ready? And then the question will be asked again. And let's hope it's quick, but quick means still a couple of years.
Linked to a bit to Ukraine, but not only. Ukraine, of course, the support to Ukraine is financial, but also military equipment. The EU is providing lots of equipment. Maybe not enough, but still there are quite a lot. And there is a growing concern that across the Atlantic, Donald Trump might come back in power and put an end to the US support to Ukraine. Assuming Donald Trump comes back, how should the EU prepare for that? Like both on the question of support to Ukraine, but more generally in terms of defense policy, industrial policy, because Trump is America first and not exactly the most supportive person to the countries that are supposed to be his allies. So how to, let's say, Trump-proof the EU?
That's a good question, and this is going to look bad on Twitter, but there's been one occasion where I kind of agreed with Trump. It doesn't happen a lot, but it was his NATO speech there, where he basically said, look, you guys just waiting for us to cover. You don't cover your 2% in NATO. And there, he had a bit of a point. So, I mean, at one point, we'll have to step up our defense capabilities. Some argue about treaty changes and having a defense commissioner. Some ask about a European army. All this exists. But disregarding all these direct proposals, if you look at Eurobarometer, for those who don't know Eurobarometer, it's a survey that the institutions do where they measure there's only one thing that keeps coming up is people want a stronger EU in the world. It really is. And well, it depends what they mean by that, but they want capability to speak with one voice, but also defend and be able to act. So maybe it's not the most elegant motive, the fear of a leader that will not have the same attitude, but in all cases, this is one element where we have to have our own strategic autonomy, our own defense capacity, and we'll have to beef that up, unfortunately, but it's a reality.
Moving on to the election themselves, so we have already, I mean, for months we've had polls and polls of polls around the EU in preparation of the elections. And one trend that we keep seeing from poll to poll is the indication that Renew Europe, the political group of which ALDE is a member, would lose seats in the next mandate. Currently, you are 101 member, if I'm not mistaken.
Like the Dalmatians.
Yeah, like the Nelson, good way to remember. And you would go, according to the polls, between 85 to 90. How do you analyze these polls? Do you agree that there might be a loss of seats? Do you think that no, there's still ways to gain ground? How do you explain this situation?
Well, we beefed up, you asked me ages ago, the difference between 14, 19 and 24, and we beefed up our capacity also to look at polling, to have the data. We've been very, very happy and proud of the position we've had in the European Parliament as kingmakers between the big EPP group, conservatives, the big socialists, and we've really helped winning some votes, and we are by kingmaker, what we mean is that we win most of the votes. They usually don't get along, so we find compromises. So if we lose that third spot, that's going to be tricky for us. I won't deny it. And we have two European political parties that are gearing extremely close to the third place. ID, the extreme right, and ECR, or I should say extreme right, and the ECR, which is the extreme right. But so we have these two groups that are getting closer. I don't think we're going to gain seats. It's going to be a difficult battle for us. But what matters is, we'd love to gain seats, clearly. But what's going to be very important for us is if we can keep this third place. And that is within reach. It really is. And we hope that people will express the need for change. Doesn't systematically mean you need to vote for something new. There is really a way to have been in power, to want to renew Europe, but to still have been there. So this is a little bit my element. So to answer your question, I think it's likely we'll keep our third place. I think we will likely lose some seats, but we really want to keep our role where we have delivered so much in this past legislature.
And speaking of winning or losing seats, a question I didn't ask at the beginning, but geographically speaking, is ALDE, like, let's say, homogeneous in its repartition in the EU, or are you a party that is more present in the north, in the south? So what's the picture, let's say, for ALDE?
Yeah, for us, again, like a Facebook status, the Mediterranean is complicated. Countries like Italy, Greece, Spain we are not very strong in these countries. I think if you wanted to be a bit provoking, as you say, we're very big in small countries and small in big countries, but that is a reality. So we are more north central right now. This is not, I'm not giving you a hint, but we have great parties doing in the east. I'm thinking in Romania, we have a very strong party kicking up. We have good signs in Portugal too, so that starts well. Italy, it's complicated. Yep. We have 3-member parties, but it's difficult to get a very strong united force there. Very personally, I'm a bit hoping on a scenario like we had in Poland, where there all opposition did not create one big party, but was on one big list. So these type of solutions work. There are some good news that come from, or we also have some good news. Again, in Poland, as I mentioned the Liberal Minister of EU Affairs this morning, but also in Slovakia is also a country where a party did really, really well. We did great in Luxembourg too. So you see, there's also some good news in some parts of Europe too.
And on the contrary, you mentioned two parties are rising in the polls, ECR and ID, so the far right, particularly ID, ECR, depends on which part of ECR we're talking about, let's say, but I see your point. How do you analyze this rise of the far right? Is it like something that can be stopped, or is it something that we have to accept? Okay, the far right is on the rise, we have to deal with it and try to see in 5 years if we can do better.
I think that the main, now I'm talking very personally, but with my EU citizen hat on, what's super complicated, because I love debates, I think you can see that I love discussions like these, and also I love discussion like this with people that absolutely don't think like me. The problem is that we're always bound by facts, and we basically we don't lie, and it makes it very complicated, because if I could tell you that by leaving the EU you could get 380 billion a day for NHS, my life would be so much easier if I could tell you that the EU expenditure are huge, and not that they represent less than 2%, less than 1% of your taxpayers' money. So all these things would really help. So how do we get to be able to share some of our thoughts without just having to correct the extreme right? And well, on this you're saying bullshit, and on this you're also not true, and that is our real challenge. And you know what I personally think is, I think maybe we should not as much come up with all the ideas and explain the ideas in length, which makes it, but to realize that we also show that we care, we listen. I remember Kakala, second time I mentioned her, but she was attending a long conference of pensioners in Estonia. And pensioners are not the ones that directly are supporting a Reform Party. And you could really feel that the whole room shifted from being, it was better before, and I'm sorry to say, I think some were already saying it was better before in communist time, to the fact that they were listened to, that somebody spent the time to be there 2 full hours in a remote place out of Panu, I think. And it shows that that is probably where we can make a difference, is by saying, look guys, we acknowledge the problem. We all have our energy bills that went up. We all saw inflation. In that case, we really are like everyone. But the solutions are not easy. I love this visual. You know this visual with where everybody goes to the left and it says easy answers to complex problems, and that really, we come with boring and complicated solutions, and we're never going to make it fully sexy, and that is a bit of a problem. And if you want to judge me on how we did, it's can we make liberalism sexy again? And I think that is the efforts we'll have to do. But it's never going to be as easy as getting 318 billion to NHS a day, or solving all your issues by closing borders. We all know it's well, no, we don't all know. I can tell you it's not by closing borders, by isolating yourself, you fix problems, especially not in this globalized world. It is by working together. And that is a way we'll have to convince. So we'll have to do our best.
And you mentioned earlier that in the process to build your manifesto, you organize like a number of town halls. So where you add like a bunch of everyday people, because like in Brussels, we like to have like lots of debates, very stratospheric notions, etc. But in these town hall meetings, like when faced, let's say, with the everyday concerns of people, particularly if they feel like, depending on where you are, but if there's a feeling of being disenfranchised, there's a pushback against globalism, blah, 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 blah. How do you tackle this issue, let's say, like give concrete answers? Because it's true that at EU level, we have a tendency to come up with big concepts, but that have little practical meaning for anyone outside Brussels. So how do you translate the big policies into something that is concrete for people?
I think the element, we keep using these examples that worked a long time. So the first element was, well, it's not perfect, but it's a project of peace. I'm thinking about these campaigns that were very popular 10 years ago, which is, what did the EU do for us? And we named them all, and the common charger, and I think the only solution is to indeed bring these small examples. Like, look, vaccines, you wouldn't have been vaccinated against COVID. COVID handling would have been much more complex, much more dragged into time if we didn't pool resources. The Russian war against Ukraine managed us to switch from the import of gas to such a quick level because we worked together. So I don't have cool things to say in a bar, except just that is indeed, yeah, well, you know what? It took us that time to switch to gas that we get from other venues, to switch to other renewable energies. And so I'm not going to have a quick bar conversation where I can explain it. I will, as I said, mostly listen, recognize that things are not as easy as they have been, and explain the complicated solution. You know, I have a party trick. I'm moving around. I mentioned I was Belgian, and I say, and I'm not going to do it now, or you'd have to convince me, but I say late at night that I can explain the Belgian political system in 1 minute, right? I can do it in 1 minute, top chrono. Well, I cannot do that with the co-decision in the parliament. I cannot explain that institution, so we really make our life complicated, huh? Because I cannot explain you the co-decision system, which is, don't try to understand if you don't know what it is, but it's how we operate. And that is really frustrating. I had a 16-year-old, not that long time ago, a 16-year-old that had done, okay, quite nerdy, Model European Council. So basically they were at school and they played around being a European Council. And she meets a senator that was at the Council of Europe. So the girl very said excitingly, yeah, I did a Model of European Council. And then the senator had to explain, yes, you know, the Council of Europe is not equal to the Council. And I'm like, shouldn't we be a bit more frustrated? I mean, what are we doing? So for the record, for those who don't know, Council of Europe has nothing to do with European Council, has nothing to do with the Council of the EU. I mean...
Yeah, our naming conventions are not exactly the best.
No, but it's even worse, and this should really frustrate some people. So I'm not talking about throwing soup to Mona Lisa on this, but I really would like this to be raised. It's like, it needs to be explainable. If you can't explain it, that's where your problem is.
You're preaching to the choir. You're preaching to the choir.
And I can explain what the commission is. Okay, it's not easy, but I said it's a bit like a government, you know, it's like ministers and then with civil servants serving it. I can explain what a parliament is. Actually, that's quite easy. Council is a bit more tricky to explain. The Council of the EU, for the record, where I kind of say it's a little bit like a Senate, or at least that's how it was designed to be. But at least it's where the member states are present. So that I can explain. But once it gets too complicated, then you know there's a problem.
Yeah, no. Again, preaching to the choir, explain the EU. It's a long process. It takes time. But yeah, we slowly. I mean, it's up to my audience to tell you if I'm doing a good job. I hope I'm doing a good job. But we try to do our bit here.
I was biking home from work, so I didn't want to interrupt. And I remember I had a Swedish girl that was standing in front of the Justuslups. And that said in Swedish, yeah, but I am in front of the parliament. Where are you? And I really wanted to stop my bike, saying, no, you're not. You're in front of the European Council. European Parliament is that way. I recognize I didn't stop. I just continued biking. Maybe I should have. She's probably still waiting there in front of the European Parliament.
Let's hope she found her way. I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to go into the final topic, which, of course, is a topic that can be dealt with in 30 seconds because, as everything. Spitzenkandidat, something that we mentioned several times in the interview, so the lead candidate system. How is ALDE going to deal with this Spitzenkandidat system, given that you are one pan-European party, but you belong to Renew Europe, which actually have 3 different components? So is there going to be one single Spitzenkandidat for Renew Europe, or is there going to be one per entity within Renew Europe? How do you tackle it?
Well, first of all, I'm going to live what I preach, and I'm not going to talk about Spitzenkandidat, because why the hell do we use a German word for something that is quite easy to explain? There are some German words that are just much better, like krank or, I don't know, so many great German words. But here, Spitzenkandidat, you can say just as much. Lead candidate for European political party. Tête de liste, if you want to speak French. Anyway, you get the point. So what's the lead candidates? It's this imperfect element of these European political parties to run for top jobs. Ideally, the president of the commission, but it's the one who embodies the European campaign. So in this world of uncertainties, I've got one certainty. If we, as an ALDE party, have a procedure that's open now, and if you're interested to be our lead candidate, you need the support of 3 European parties from 3 EU countries. Just need to send me a letter until the 29th of February. And then on 20th of March in Brussels, we will elect our ALDE lead candidate. But now is the part where you're going to tell me what has happened with the other ones. No, with the 2 other components of our group, we agreed to campaign together under a platform called Renew Europe Now, which is a platform that was this 2 European political parties, ALDE, EDP, and Renaissance, and the other individual members. There we agreed to run with lead candidates. There's a small caveat with a S, and it's not a Machiavellic plan. What happened is that we, as liberal parties, as I told you, 2014, we said, let's have 1 candidate. Turned out we had 2. In 2019, it was a bit different. We really wanted transnational lists, and because we couldn't get it, we said, well, let's do it this way. We'll have a candidate from Copenhagen, 1 from Madrid, 1 from Ghent, 1 from Berlin, 1 from Budapest, 1 from, who am I forgetting? Let me start again. Copenhagen, Madrid, Ghent, Budapest, Berlin, and Madrid. That was close. With Luis Gargano. So that was a little bit our way of operating. So now we will have a lead candidate, and let's see with our partners. It's not impossible. In 2014-19, the EDP also elected our lead candidate as their lead candidate, so that worked. So that you'll have to see 20th of March. I don't think we'll run with 8 candidates again. We have a resolution saying we'll only have 1, but let's see a bit about the profile, about... we're in it full-heartedly in this concept of lead candidates, but not exactly like EPP or PES, where for them it's really a job application. Here we really are fully playing the game in the way that these are the person that will represent us and that is really running for a top job. And that would be perfectly capable to run the European Commission too, if they get it. But our element is really to embody and have a European campaign.
And at the same time, the lead candidate system has had some difficulties because in 2014 it worked. We had Jean-Claude Juncker that was elected president of the Commission. In 2019, the member states say, "Well, no, thank you," and they put Ursula von der Leyen. So there's a question mark on the survivability of the concept of lead candidate, even if EPP might try to cheat a little bit by putting again Ursula von der Leyen to try to cook the member state. But do you think that the lead candidate system can come back in fashion in council, or it's still going to be a fight?
Well, there's a bit of an inside joke among my colleagues there is who killed the Spitzenkandidat system. Some people blame us because we had several candidates. Some people blame the EPP of not letting the second lead up once you couldn't make a majority, Frans Timmermans, have a shot. For some, those who really see this as a job application, you could argue the system did not go as planned and was not perfect. In our case, this was about having debates between the candidates, and we got the debates, and it is the biggest political family that got the presidency. So it's imperfect, but it's never been a perfect system. There are some flaws in this system. So for the more nerdies among you guys, so the whole plan was really to have, the treaties are clear. It's the council, member states, that pick the president of a commission, but needs to be validated by the European Parliament. And what the parties did is actually say, well, look, we're not going to validate anyone that did not run first as a lead candidate. So it's already imperfect in its core decision. So it depends what you want of this. If this is a job description interview, it's not the best way to recruit. If this is a way to really have a European campaigning, an embryonic element of campaigning, then this is a pretty decent, not that bad system. Maybe the less worse system, but I still really profoundly like it. Does this answer your question?
Yeah, okay, kind of. And still, just a final question on the Spitzenkandidat. Like you said, EPP is the biggest, and the system says that in practice, the presidential commission goes to the winner of the election, the biggest party. So on paper, ALDE will not be necessarily against a von der Leyen 2 commission. Should the EPP win the...
So first of all, one super important correction, because we always signed up for the lead candidate system, but only if it was the one that got a majority. Because obviously if it was always the biggest one, we wouldn't play along. So it's the one that it's a small nuance, but you see, because indeed, if you say the biggest one, imagine if EPP would not manage to make any alliance with nobody. It's not guaranteed. It's not a given right, in that case, God's given right, for them to head the commission. So it's the one that gathers a majority of the parliament. Small nuance, but for us it matters, obviously. I think it's likely they might run again with Ursula von der Leyen. That's something they'll have to decide. I believe they also have a deadline for nominations.
Yes.
And but if she would run again, she would be like any other Schaetzen, and she will run again Schmidt, and whoever the ALDE Party will present with the Renew Europe Now platform, present as our lead candidate.
All right, so I'm seeing it's been an hour, so I promised I will not keep you any longer. So I hope you enjoyed your first experience on Twitch. I hope that didn't traumatize you. I'm sure you were great. Before I let you go, if there is like one thing the audience, our viewers needs to remember from tonight, what would be your message to them?
If you're waiting for the perfect party, the perfect candidate that really embodies everything you believe for in Europe, you might wait for a long time, and I actually don't think you'll find it, except if you run yourself and still then. No, what you have to do is, I'm sorry to say, it's a bit cynical to vote. You have to vote for the one that you think is the less worse. And I don't mean this negatively, but it is a person that where you feel strong, you trust. It is somebody that you can relate to. It's somebody that you have to say, okay, she or he can decide on my behalf. But the element of waiting for perfection, of waiting for, well, I'm not interested, is something where doesn't really work in life and doesn't really work in political life too. So to engage is a bit of a duty. It comes with it. You have to get interested. And even if your case is limited, if all you care about, and that's not a judgment, is animal protections and banning fireworks, then you can do that too. And then look at what people think about it. And so don't feel bad of not being interested in everything and co-decision, adhesion of member parties. But the element of having to show some interest and to find the person, because elections is about person, that embodies this the best, is your role, is my role, is the role of everyone. And that is the message I would do, because there's 128 days. Yeah, I know it's scary. I have this countdown clock in my head. And that's the time you have to make up your mind. And more importantly, I was nearly going to forget that, is once you voted, don't consider it done. That's when you have to deliver, and you have to check that they actually delivered. So really, in the US, they write your congressman, well, bloody write your MEP, check what's being delivered. It's a bit like a shareholding that you have in a person. And first of all, I have issues with people that don't want to engage at all, but if you get engaged, it's also, you have a responsibility to follow up to see if your vote has been respected.
All right, that's very clear. Thank you very much, Didrik Schaetzen, for taking the time to answer our question. Chat, make sure to thank him for his time. You can follow the news related to ALDE through the links. You see the X at of ALDE, so you can go check the manifesto when it will be voted and get to know the party better ahead of the elections. Mr. Schaetzen, thank you again for being with us, and I wish you a good evening. Chat, stay with us. We're going to do the debrief in a minute.
Thank you very much, and maybe Quentin, if I may,
Yep.
we have an email address, campaign@aldeparty.eu, where you can ask any questions you might have, because I had the chat there on my right screen, but I'm not sure we managed to answer everything. But you can write us, campaign@aldeparty.eu, and we'll answer your question.
All right, chat. Go fetch your email address, and you know where to write. Thank you a lot, Mr. Didrik Schaetzen. Bye-bye.
Cheers, thanks.
Bye. All right, chat. Let's do the debrief. Let me know all your impressions. I want to know everything. I'm turning off Zoom, taking up my little thing, and we can get into it. So what did we think? That I can close. All right, I'm all yours. Raspberry, you were in luck because you had a Swedish-speaking person tonight. So yeah, before the interview, so yeah, if you want, I can answer some questions in Swedish. My Swedish is a bit rusty, so I'm not sure I would be able to deliver. But in theory, you could have. You could have wrote a bit Swedish and asked your questions there. All right, so it was a first interview of the season. Time to get back into the good habits, etc. You're hoping to copy paste Cecilia and some career. Interested in any question? Well, you're interested in any question? Well, we have many questions here, Raspberry. You will have many questions. What was I saying? So yeah, getting back into the good habits. We see it has very much to do. Very niche question. Yeah, sorry. I didn't see the I saw it too late. The one about Memstorm, so I didn't relate. But if you want to ask him, I mean, you have his ads. I'm sure he will be very happy to answer you. So today it was a bit of a different interview because we're not with an MEP, we're not with a Federalist activist or something like that. We also with people, someone working for a pan-European party, which, if you've been on the channel before, you probably have heard me talk a bit about the pan-European party. I think I mentioned them quite a bit over the past few weeks. But it's true, it's a bit the part of the EU that nobody really knows, because you know maybe, so you know the MEPs, or you know the national parties, you know maybe the political group, but the pan-European parties is the thing that is above all this, and that still has a role in it, and they're not voting, they're really like the coordination framework of all political parties around Europe, and everyone has their own party. The EPP has the EPP, you have the EPP group in parliament and the EPP party. Renew Europe has three components. You have ALDE, you have EDP, and you have Renaissance, the French party, because the French decided to do the French thing, being no, we're different. Well, I mean, Renaissance decided to do the French thing of saying we're different, we're our own thing, because in ALDE as a French member, one or two French member. I know they have UDI for sure. I think they have a second one. I think they have a second. The Radicaux. I think they're also in ALDE. Well, in any case, they have a French member. One or two. But yeah, they work a bit at a meta level, trying to coordinate actions between the different political parties. They're the contact points for ministers, for leaders of their respective parties. So, like he mentioned at the beginning, before the European Council, so these big meetings where you had the leaders meeting on Macron, Scholz, etc. Before the beginning of the summit, they will meet per party. So you will have the leaders, the ministers of Renew Europe that will meet together to coordinate, discuss between each other, have a strategy. You have the leaders of EPP that will meet together and try to strategize, etc. So there's already a first level that is organized at the level of the pan-European party. Why say pan-European and not just European? I thought pan-European was... Oh, yeah. I debated, actually, good you mentioned it, because I had the exact same question when I was preparing the interview. I was like, okay, how am I going to describe ALDE and the parties? Because if my concern was that if I was saying, okay, ALDE is the European party, which is true, technically speaking, ALDE is the European party, my concern is that people would mistake it for the group in the European Parliament. They would say, oh, it's like a Renew Europe in the European Parliament, which is not. So I said pan-European because it's above, and it's also beyond the EU. European, we associate it to the EU. Actually, ALDE and the other party have members outside of the EU. Like I mentioned at the beginning, they have members in Russia, in Albania, in Ukraine, in the UK. So you have members really beyond the EU. So that's why I chose pan-European. You're right that pan-Europeanism is an ideology. It's a political courant. But yeah, for the sake, I mean, that was my thinking that it would be maybe a bit more understandable if I was calling it that. But yeah, it was an editorial choice to call it a pan-European party rather than a European party to avoid the confusion with the European political groups, let's say. Because they are different entities, and the political group in the European Parliament and the party are different things. They are strictly separated. They have different structure. You may have some people are in common, like for instance in the EPP, the president of the EPP party and the political group EPP is the same person. It's Manfred Weber. Manfred Weber is the president of both organizations, but formally they are separated. The political group only works within the European Parliament. It doesn't really care, or it doesn't really work outside of Parliament. What is outside the European Parliament would be the matter of the party. And that's where they do the coordination between the parties, working on the manifestos, etc., etc. So that's a big the difference between a political party, a pan-European political party like ALDE, and the political group that is Renew Europe in the case of ALDE. What else did we discuss? We discussed plenty of things, so I need to pick and choose. If you have questions on your side, don't hesitate. You glad he was realistic about their election changes? Would have expected a plan on how to turn it around. It felt like he already accepted the result. Yeah, I mean, at the same time, it's. I mean, he has to be realistic, and in a way, it's a bit being genuine with you, with you, because of course he could have said, oh yeah, of course, the polls are saying that we're losing, I don't know, 10, 12 seats, but actually we will campaign and we will gain 20. He could have told us perfectly and say, oh yeah, no, we're gonna fight to gain more seats. But it's not like it's not because you're decreting that you're going to win more seats that you're actually going to win more seats. So I think it's a mark of realism and in a way, humility, political humility, in the sense of, okay, it's not, accept that things may be difficult for our party, and we will fight, we will try to limit the damage, but okay, things are what they are, and it's up to us to provide the answers, to try to convince people to still vote for us, but not being a bit saying, oh no, the polls are trash. Of course, we're going to win 20 seats, because in the end, like, if everyone says that, it doesn't recognize, like, well, sometimes the truth of what polls may indicate, even if polls are not necessarily the truth, but they indicate trends that shows you a direction of thing. I don't see it necessarily as problematic. In this case, I see it more as a mark of be genuine, like being real. Say, okay, things are going to be a bit more difficult for us, and also it forces them to set realistic targets, because they can say, okay, right now what we really want, we're not fighting to become as big as the EPP. What we want is to maintain our place as the third biggest political group in the European Parliament, because then it maintains us as the kingmakers, etc. So it's forced them to to stay realistic and focus on what actually matters, let's say, as a political stake for them. So in their case, ALDE's priority is to do their best to make sure that Renew Europe in the next mandate remains the third party, I do the confusion party political group, the third biggest political group in the European Parliament, so that they can maintain their status as kingmakers, because that's something that is indeed like something that the liberals, whether it is ALDE or EDP or Renaissance, are very proud of, is this status of kingmakers. They say, yeah, we are the ones that determine the majority, because they work as well. They can work as well with the left as with the right. So on many issues, since like you don't have like any political group that has the majority on their own, well, they are the determining factor on the majority. SND and the Greens and GUE does not necessarily win a majority, but if they have Renew, they will win. If you have a majority on the opposite, EPP, ECR, or Renew, that can form a majority. So they depending on where they position themselves, they will trigger a majority. So that's why they call themselves the kingmakers, and they tend to be the kingmakers indeed on many issues, with some slight exception, like for instance, like if we since we were talking about the far right, so ID. I don't know if I discussed it on stream. I definitely discussed it on Twitter. I'm not sure if we discussed it here, but like for instance, the one exception to that I can see in the short term was back in September or October, when there was a vote on the regulation, what was called the SURE regulation, basically the pesticide regulation. Where actually ID, the far right, became the kingmaker there, because they switched majority, and that the fact that they switched majority from point of the vote to a different point of the vote, made them the kingmakers. Initially, they sided with the conservatives, so with the EPP, and then they sided with the left to remove something, and then they sided again with the conservatives. So they in this particular vote, they had a role of kingmaker, and that could potentially be indicative of a new trend on certain specific topics. Just came across as tone deaf a bit to the plight of the voters. Even he admitted the far right went down to talk to people on the fringes. Maybe they could climb down from the aisle. I didn't feel like he was tone deaf. On the contrary, he was saying, "Yeah, no, we have to talk to people about the issue." That, I mean, on the contrary, he would have been tone deaf. He would say, "Yeah, of course, people are going to vote for us, and that's why we're going to have 20 more seats." On the contrary, he said, "Yeah, we have to be real with people and say, okay, acknowledge, yes, there's inflation, yes, there is a cost of energy, blah, 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 blah." So, I don't know. I didn't particularly feel it as being tone deaf. At least that was not my impression. If you think like that, that's your interpretation. You're completely entitled to it. What else did we discuss? In terms of priorities, indeed, I realized we didn't talk a lot about the priorities apart from the Green Deal. Green Deal, we did discuss it, the whole farming issues, and you know that these days there are quite a few protests from farmers. Today there was one in Brussels. I was very happy to be woken up at 6 in the morning. But well, yeah, that plays into something that we have talked in the past, which is this tendency now, this trend of a backlash against at least part of the Green Deal, part of the green regulations, whether at national or EU level, and the concerns. Okay, is that something that we need to address? Do we need to weaken the kind of green policies we're doing at EU level? And that's going to be very likely one of the key topics in the elections. How do we adapt the future of the Green Deal? Like on the left, there will be the question: okay, how do we make how do we make a social Green Deal? On the right is how do we make a competitive Green Deal? On the far right, how do we kill the Green Deal? So the future of the Green Deal and how to make it socially and societally acceptable will be a core topic, most likely in this election, particularly since the Green Deal was like the big policy of this moment. Like in 2019, you remember it was all about the answering the fighting climate change, and von der Leyen, when she was elected, said my commission will be the commission that deals with climate change, and that's why she came up with the Green Deal. So that will be we will see how people address the Green Deal, the future of the Green Deal, in the context of public backlash in a number of countries against that, for varying reasons. Some for social reasons, other for more ideological, economic reasons. So there's plenty of different reasons why some people may be critical of the Green Deal. And on the other side, well, the Green Deal, we still have the climate change has not disappeared. So on the other side, some are saying, yeah, we need to keep going. We need to keep going. Because we have targets, and we have to. The EU has to become climate neutral by 2050, and it's not going to happen just by snapping our fingers. What we did discuss otherwise, the farmers. Yeah, it's something he mentions. He said something that frustrates him a lot is the issue of farming protests being capitalized on by the far right, and actually there was a pretty cool article about that. And it's true that the far right is trying very hard. Everyone is trying to capitalize on the farming, the farmers' protest, because well, it's an electoral pool. They are popular in a number of countries. So of course, some might say that these protests really kickstarted the political campaign for the EU elections, and they are trying through different angles with varying degree of success, and one that is going heavy is the far right, playing on the idea, okay, farmers are the how can I describe how they approach it? They are the perfect incarnation of concepts pushed by the far right, like the idea of reality, tradition, the idea of people being left behind by globalism, free trade agreement, too many regulation of the EU, blah blah blah. So pissed off people. So they're kind of the perfect target for far right parties, and they can try to capitalize a lot on this, despite the fact that the far right has the key feature of the far right is that they're against everything. So even on a number of policies that are defended by farmers, they were not necessarily the far right. That is, was not necessarily on their side. On the other side, you have the Greens as well, who are trying to was struggling a little bit to say that they are the BFF of farmers, because I see a bit of a struggle, because while they have arguments saying yes, there is a social aspect to the problem of farmers, which is true, because there is a need to ensure like a decent condition of life for farmers, decent wages, etc., because it's true that most farmers do not exactly roll on gold. Far from it. It's not a fun job being a farmer, rather the contrary. And the Greens are saying, okay, we need to improve their conditions of living, but at the same time, and even if they deny it right now, it's true that they've been pitching themselves and they've been identified also as a bit I don't want to say enemy number one, but the primary opponent to a number of positions that farmers have been defending, notably on the Green Deal, because, for instance, the Greens wanted more ambitious climate targets. They wanted ambitious climate targets applicable to agriculture, and the farmers on the other side were not so keen on that, and clashed pretty hard on this. You had a part of the Greens who were basically presenting the farmers as being people who want to poison Europeans, etc., who are refusing change, they are not fighting for climate change, etc. And now it's like they're coming a bit back to bite them in the ass, as they're struggling a bit to show to the farmers, oh yeah, but actually we've always been on the same side. Really, we've always been on the same side. And even the Conservatives, who historically, especially the EPP has been pitching itself very strongly as the Farmers' Party lately, and to a lesser extent the Renew. The Socialists also have Socialists have a bit split, as in many things, because you have one part that is historically close to the farmers, and another part that is more close to environmental issues, etc. So the SND was a bit more divided, but EPP has pitched itself as the party of farmers. But the one thing that goes against them is that in a lot of cases, like the Liberals, they've been supporters of trade agreements, free trade agreements, and so farmers are definitely not happy about free trade, because for them it's competition, and that's where the far right then hits them and saying, even the left saying, oh look, you're saying you're the party of farmers, but you voted for all the free trade agreements, so you're not the true friends of the farmers, blah blah blah. So if I expect for the coming weeks, there's going to be a lot of dueling over who is the best friend of farmers, both on the right and on the left, and the rest. And speaking of trade deals, it's something that was interesting that Mr. de Schaetzen said, oh yeah, we can't compare the old trade deals to the new trade deals, like the trade deals from 20 years ago and the trade deals that we have right now. Because they say, oh yeah, now it's not unconditional trade, which is true. The trade agreements are as a category of deals have evolved over the years. And it's not just let's open the borders and bring all your content, all your products in Europe. Now it's much more demanding. You have environmental criteria, you have labor criteria, you have quotas, you have many different things, because it's the way of the EU and member state to react to the backlash against trade deal that is rather ancient. It's been 20 years, say 20 years, even more if you take the reactions to the WTO, etc. But yeah, there's a long-standing criticism against against trade deals, and so the EU is trying to adapt its models of trade deals to make them greener, to make them more socially sustainable in a sense, if that makes sense as an appellation, and provide an answer. It even came to the point, first time I've seen that, I don't think I've ever saw like another example, where in the recent trade deal between the EU and New Zealand, for the first time, I think, the Greens supported a free trade deal with New Zealand. Why? Because it was the first trade deal that had binding and strong green components, let's say, that was forcing to an extent, putting binding targets to become environmentally sustainable, etc. It was with New Zealand, so with a country that is already developed, not a huge country, etc. So there's a debate on whether that could be replicated for other countries, but to my knowledge, that's the first time I've ever seen the Greens actually supporting a EU trade deal, which was surprising to be honest. And so yeah, there's an evolution of trade deals as we go. It goes hand in hand with the concept of strategic autonomy, the fact that the EU is more and more willing to protect itself and maybe be, actually at least that's the way it's been pitched, but a bit less naive in the sense of saying, oh yeah, we have to accept that we have to defend our interest, and not everyone is necessarily on our side, and so they're adapting through the strategic autonomy concept, the new kinds of trade deals, all the different tools that the carbon taxation, etc., to protect a bit more the European market against what is deemed to be unfair competition or unfair practices. But yeah, any questions on your side? Oh no, because I'm rambling, but now it's more, let's say, the open conversation part. So if there's anything else you want to discuss, now is the time. I'm looking at the time. So I'm a bit tired, to be honest. I didn't sleep much, partly because the farmers woke me up early. What do I think on his Ukraine take? I agree to an extent. I mean, I've been saying that here on the stream. It's true. Where I agree with him is that it's not a matter of agreeing with him, it's fact. When we're talking about Ukraine joining the EU, we're not talking about Ukraine joining tomorrow the EU. It's a process that will take a long time. He said like optimistic views say 8 years. I would say an optimistic view would be double that, rather. I don't see the Ukraine coming in the EU for 10 to 20 years. So it's true that, yeah, it's something that will take time, and part of the reason why it takes time is that there will be a lot of negotiation, a lot of things to sort out. So many of the things that are being pointed at as potential issues regarding Ukraine joining the EU, corruption, the size of the impact on agriculture, on cohesion funds, the fact there is a war going on, etc., they are the low salaries, these sort of things. They are points that are legitimate or even true. And that's precisely why this negotiation will take time, because part of this negotiation will be to tackle these issues. How do we force Ukraine to you reduce the level of corruption? How do we put together systems to make sure that the minimum salary becomes a bit closer to the average European salary? How do we figure out how we're going to deal with the size of the Ukrainian agriculture market? So that's why these things take a lot of time. And I agree with him that it's wrong to present the candidacy of Ukraine as, oh, it's something that's going tomorrow, and those are problems that will never be solved. The fact that this takes time is the very reason why. I mean, there are problems. That's why it's going to take a long time to solve them out. And if the EU, if this problem will not sort it out, well, at the end, I mean, there's not a deadline. We don't have to. There's nothing that says, okay, in 5 years, automatically Ukraine joins the EU. If in 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, Ukraine is considered to be not at the stage where they can join the EU, they will not join the EU. There will be, and even when they fulfill the technical criteria, so all the Copenhagen criteria and the implementation of the EU acquis, the stronger economic situation, etc., they have to get political approval. So that means that the head of the governments will have to say yes or no for Ukraine to join, and potentially referendums. So there are plenty of time. There's plenty of time, and there's plenty of safeguards. So I agree with him to that extent that there is an attempt from some to dramatize, let's say, the entry of Ukraine in there. So to that extent, I agree with him on how he presents the issue. But then, yeah, he did not deny that, there's going to be big questions to be answered on the place of agriculture, because Ukraine is a huge agricultural power. The impact it will have on the EU funds, because I think it's been calculated that if Ukraine was to join tomorrow, which again is not going to happen, blah blah blah, pretty much all the countries that are currently net beneficiaries, many of the countries that are currently net beneficiaries of the EU of the EU budget, meaning countries that get more money than they give to the EU. So, for instance, France or Germany, they are not they are contributing countries. So they give, in terms of money, they give more money to the EU than they receive back in terms of fund. This doesn't mean that France and Germany do not benefit from the EU. They benefit on many different ways. But in terms of pure cash, they give more money to the EU than they receive. That makes them contributing countries. If you go in the east, take Poland, take Hungary, take the Czech Republic, take Romania, they are the countries that are beneficiaries. They receive more money from the EU through regional funds, through the farming funds, so all the different EU funds, they receive more money than they give. And according to the calculation, given the size of Ukraine, given because Ukraine is what, 40 million people? Let me check that. Population Ukraine. 43.7 million people. So it's a big country, a big country. It's like equivalent to Spain. It's bigger than Poland, and I think it's equivalent to Spain, more or less. Or is it Spain? Yeah. But Spain is 47 million. So yeah, more or less that. It's in the same ballpark. So bigger because of the size of Ukraine, the state of its economy, etc. It's been calculated that if they were to join tomorrow, many countries that are currently beneficiaries would become contributing, because suddenly you would have a country, Ukraine, that would need much more. They would need the money much more than them, and so the money would be refunneled towards Ukraine. So yeah, there's going to be huge impact. To an extent, it's not the first time it happens. When we had the 2004 wave of integration, 10 countries, that's a hefty bit to take on board. And in there, you had Poland, that was also a big agricultural country. You have Romania, Bulgaria was later. You have a bunch of Eastern countries that have also corruption issues. So it's not the first time that the EU is getting like a big things to deal with. So I think there's also a need to de-dramatize a bit that on the fact that Ukraine is poorer. And as far as France is concerned, for the past 50 years, the EU has been integrating countries that were poorer than France. Like if you follow the line of argument that we can't let Ukraine join because they have a lower salary, they have very low salary compared to us. What would we have done when Portugal, when Spain was coming, we say, oh no, sorry, you're coming out of a dictatorship. You can't come with us because you have lower salary. No, that doesn't make sense. We have dealt in the past for the past 50 years. We've had poorer countries joining the EU. We manage fine. We manage just fine. So yeah, I think there's a need to de-dramatize to a good extent the candidacy of Ukraine. It's we have time. Nobody is denying that there are things that will be tackled. And yeah, we can do it. There is a history of dealing with this kind of issues. The number one problem, I would say at the moment, is the war, because whatever happens in terms of corruption, in terms of level of salary, as long as the country is at war, I don't think entering the EU is exactly the number one priority and the something that's gonna happen. So they are like say. Bigger fish to fry on that front. Any other question? Otherwise, I'm going to wrap up because I'm tiring a bit. I have to say, I don't know if you can see, like I didn't sleep much. I hope that the interview was nice on your side. It's a bit of a different kind of guest. Now I can say it. I've contacted all the main political parties to invite the Secretary General to come on the channel so that they can tell us, okay, well, today we heard what ALDE is thinking. If I can get the EPP, if I can get the SND, the Green to come over to tell us, okay, what do they think? That's something I would like to do for this season. Barring, of course, the fact that they are available. But yeah, that's one type of guest I hope to bring more on the channel, among other things. Checking something. No. Okay, I'm scrolling up to see if I missed any question during the interview. Financial of ALDE was covered. Yeah, no, I think we covered pretty much all the issues. All right, then let's do the conclusion if there is no more questions to be asked on your side. So I hope that you enjoyed this first interview of the season, this new sort of guest. Next time I see you, first before I tell you, next time you see me, if you like what you saw, of course, as usual, follow the channel if that's not already the case. If you have a Prime lying around, do toss a coin to your streamer. That's always very helpful. Next time I see you, it will be on Wednesday for the French. We're going to do the news review, and in English, it's going to be on Friday at 5 for the news review as well in English. As usual, don't forget to follow me on my other social media, Twitter, Discord, all the good thing. That's where you have the memes, that's where you have the program, that's where you have the nice people to talk with. So of course, I encourage you to come over there. And on this note, well, I hope that you enjoy everything, and I wish you a good evening, and I will see you next time. Bye everyone. Ciao, ciao.